What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 85 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Split Screen Games weekly gaming podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah,
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a bit of a busy week, a hectic week, I think, for both of us in different ways, but I'm happy to be here and talk Steam Deck with you, especially because we got a real fun question to jump into today from the Steam docket. It's going to be our main topic today, and I love when this happens because I've been thinking about this very question recently, and I had a long conversation with a good friend of mine about this very topic just last night even. So like the thoughts were all ready to go in my head, and then we get asked the exact right question at the exact right time. Sometimes it just works, man. You know, sometimes it just comes together. So Baba wrote in over on the Discord and said, "Hey guys, just a crazy thought. Do you guys think that PC is killing or at least changing the way consoles will be in the future? Seeing rumors about PlayStation doing day-to-day, I think they mean day and date, releases on games, Xbox talking about not needing a box to play, and I saw something like 4 years ago on Steam, there were 15 million concurrent users, and now they have surpassed 36 million concurrent. 36 or something like that. I have nephews and friends' kids who are only playing on PC right now, so maybe the next generation of consoles are going to be the last consoles we'll see. What do you guys think?"
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I do think that there has been a bit of a shift in the last few years, right? And I don't know if it was the PlayStation 5 generation or if it was a little bit before that. That PC gaming has definitely had a lot more of a resurgence and a renaissance, which is great. And obviously with the things like the Steam Deck and Steam OS, being able to take that on the go it has been absolutely game changing. But I do think that it's now got to the point where the main platform holders, I mean, obviously Microsoft were already putting their games out on PC, but we've seen PlayStation take a big shift to that. And in the last couple of weeks, they've also released like the ability to kind of share your achievements across games with their new kind of PC launcher, which was pretty cool. So they're definitely doubling down on the PC stuff. So whether they see it as a threat to their business, whether they see that this is the future of their business, the PC is the future of their business, or whether it's just going to be something that's additional to them, maybe for the short term, or if that becomes the long term, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think for me, what you're talking about, Baba, I think is probably more representative of the overall widening of the gaming market, more so than the idea that consoles are at risk of being replaced by PC, at least in the imminent future, right? I think the thing that I always come back to is that I think PC gaming is inherently more niche than console gaming because there are barriers of entry that exist to PC that don't exist on console. And
what barriers would you say there are?
I think there's a couple. I think price is the obvious one, right? So in our Discord, there's a couple comments I wanted to pull in because Baba's question got people talking, right? So Wakahula, one of our Patreon producers, wrote in response to Baba's question and said, the peak on Steam was roughly 36 million online and roughly 10 million in-game. There are over 200 million current gen consoles on the market, right? So that's just accounting for the PlayStation and the X5 and the Xbox series of consoles. And then I guess we're not counting Switch in that, right? Because that's technically, that would be a bigger number then.
They're off doing their own thing anyway. But, I don't think there's a lot of overlap there with PC gamers anyway.
Well, but I think that's kind of the point, though, that I'm driving towards, right? Is this idea that anecdotally, I see kids in my life that only play on PC. Does that mean kids are moving away from consoles? No, it means that the kids are playing on PC, right? And that's not to say that PC gaming isn't on the rise. I think it is. I think clearly it has been over the last couple decades since Valve kind of revitalized the space. And, you know, you see more and more people getting into it and more markets getting into it. Like we've talked about how, you know, during the pandemic, like PC gaming, you know, has made some real inroads in Eastern markets where it's historically not been as strong. So I think that, yeah, I think there's definitely increased interest in playing on PC. And I think stuff like the Steam Deck is a really good, you know, inroad for those things. And Wakahula made a point that I want to drive to here. So there was a response to that from One Up Mango, another one of long-term members of the community, who wrote in and said, "It's important to note, though, that we do not have numbers for the concurrent online users for any of the consoles, and Steam is only one launcher out of so many. Epic Games is the only way to launch Fortnite on PC, and I have seen people still use Battle.net for COD, despite it being available on Steam. Nintendo will always have the pull of their IP and their exclusives, but if a majority of gamers are playing live service games, there's definitely reason for Xbox and Sony to explore growth through the PC market and make the line between consoles and PCs less distinguishable." And then here's what Wakahula had to say. "Yeah, but decent gaming PC for playing these games on the level of a console is still at least 2 times more than a console. And the Steam Deck doesn't count. Most of the games on this list don't even run on that." And that was in response to an article that was shared that was about how 60% of playtime in 2023 went to games that were 6 years old or more, right? And that includes games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Roblox, GTA 5, right? So kind of the point being there that even if you want to get into some of these older games, right, the price of entry on PC is more than console, out of the box. On top of that, there is a level of knowledge required to use a gaming PC that isn't required for using a box, right? If you buy a PlayStation or an Xbox, you bring it home, you plug it in, maybe you pay for online, and then you're playing Fortnite, right? Or you're playing Call of Duty, you're in. And on PC, it's not that simple, right? Like there's you have to understand the hardware that you're buying, you have to understand like what it can run, you have to understand how to check whether the games that you're going to play are going to run, are they going to work? Like
That is true for like a general PC though, but I do think there is like a shift moving towards these like mini PCs and like things like the Steam Deck.
Right.
And granted, what Wakahula said is correct. Some of those games you can't play on Steam Deck, but I don't think that is because of horsepower. It's because Epic has decided we don't want to allow Fortnite to play on Linux, so we're gonna block that.
It's still not a point against his point, right? Is that like, so even for these more budget options that you're talking about, they have limitations that consoles don't have. And then on top of that, I think
those consoles have their own limitations, though.
Sure, but do those matter to the average consumer?
To some extent, I think they do. Like, I want to be able to play my old games and go back and play them. I can't play Simpsons Hit and Run on my Xbox, even though I have a disc of it, because it's not part of the backwards compatibility program.
Yeah.
I either need to keep an Xbox around and figure out some kind of adapter so I can play it on an HD TV now, because my TV doesn't have the relevant ports in order to plug an original Xbox in, or I can play the PC version, which still runs to this day on any PC, and it's flawless, and there's no problems with it whatsoever.
And don't get me wrong, I think that the kind of value proposition of a library of PC games is I think really hard to argue. I think that is kind of the advantage of PC over other platforms, is that it's not beholden to generations, right? It's like you have a library that grows with you, and that's that. And I mean, how much does that matter to the average consumer, right? Like, I think it matters to certain types of consumers. And I think that for those people, that is a thing that matters. But it's like, you know, I think when you get into the nitty gritty of like the spirit of Baba's question, right? Is PC killing or changing the way consoles will sell? I don't think the fact that you can play old games on your PC is influencing the needle in that way, in a major way. Is it a differentiator? Is it a significant differentiator to a segment of players that you and I are both a part of? Yeah, absolutely. That's why we own a Steam Deck, right? That said, that's not necessarily something that every person needs. And we talk all the time about the kind of quote unquote casual gamer that isn't playing quote unquote casual games, but that owns a PlayStation 5 probably, and
plays Fortnite,
or plays Call of Duty, or buys FIFA, and maybe they play one big trip, like they play Fallout or something because they watched the show and now they want to go jump into Fallout 4, and their experience playing those games on a PS5 on their, substandard 4K TV in their living room is exactly what they're looking for, and they don't care that they can't play Simpsons Hit and Run or that they're not getting true 4K. Like, they don't give a shit, and it's not worth for them the extra amount of, like, I think of my bandmate Caleb in that situation where, like, his current setup is my old PlayStation 4, and that's what he's still playing games on, right? And it's like, that's fine for him because he only just got a 4K TV. He doesn't care about 4K gaming. He doesn't care about frame rate. He plays a small amount of video games for a certain amount of time a year, and what he's got right now is serving him just fine. And for those people, they're not going to buy a PC rig and set up a desk in their house or find a way to connect it to their television and jump through all those hoops because they don't want to, and they're not interested in doing that. It's the same way that a lot of people, like if you're a real movie person, you probably buy Blu-rays because you want to have the best looking version and the best experience and the best audio. But most people just stream their fucking shit on Netflix, and they don't care that it's not 4K and that it sounds like shit.
Especially now there's got some of them fans have got ads, and people just don't care about that either. Most of the time, it's just background watching, and
right?
It's just there.
So I think to me, this is the last point I want to make, and then please go off because I've been monologuing. But I think the last kind of thing that I think is the Achilles heel of why PC is not ever really gonna, at least I don't think so. I don't think we'll ever replace consoles as like the dominant way to play, is that there's too much variance among PCs. That you and I can both own a PC that is nice, quote unquote, that we spend a lot of money on and not be able to run the same games is a challenge that I don't think that like we figured out yet. Look at how almost every AAA game that launches on PC day and date does not work or does not work well. And that's the vast majority.
I think that's a large part in the fact that the developers just aren't prioritizing PC, and maybe that is again.
But why? Why don't they prioritize
testament
PC?
To the fact that, yeah, I don't know if that's an empty dance floor scenario where is there any point in putting the effort in because there aren't the people to buy it on day one,
right?
But maybe if they did put the effort in, more people would pick it up on day one because we've seen
both,
some big games. We've seen some big games this year that has happened with, right? Like Helldivers 2, for example, launched on PlayStation and PC day and day. It was their first title that did that, and that sold phenomenally well. It had a real growth on PC, and I don't think it would have been as big a title if it was locked to PlayStation.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and you're totally right about that. And that's the thing is, I think that speaks to the fact that there are a lot of PC gamers and that they are very activated. And like, that's an important thing. It's like, it's a very, the most core market of gamers are people that primarily play on PC, I would argue. Like the most hardcore, right? And
yeah, it's like they're like car guys. They bought their car, they keep it looking nice, they tidy it up, and they make sure.
But for a lot of people,
is
a car is just a tool. It's just a device, and it's not. I don't care what its specs are. I don't care how fast it can go. I care that it can get me to my job, right? Or I care that it gets me to the grocery store. And like for a lot of people, that's what they want. And they don't care about that shit. And like, look at the popularity of the Nintendo Switch, right? Like that is the most popular console on the market right now. And it is 7 years old using tech that was 3 or 4 years old when they put it in the damn thing. And it's great. And the game of the year last year for a lot of people was a game on that device that ran at 30 frames per second. And I think it speaks to the fact that what is important to the PC market is not necessarily important to the average consumer. And I think that what is important to the average consumer is being able to buy the new box, and that it's better than the old box, and that there are new versions of the franchises they already were following, and maybe they get into a couple new games. Like, that's what they're looking to do. And for the average person, $500 is already a lot of money to spend on a device that you don't use every day, right? So, like, let alone the fact that a PC setup has a lot of other costs, right? Like, because it's
But PC does also offer a lot of other things, right? Say you work from home, for example, and you can work off that same PC. You could probably write it off on your taxes to some extent.
Sure.
Like there are ways that you can like justify that purchase. I think
I think that's also a turnoff for a lot of people, though, because most people do not want to spend all day in one room on a PC.
No, yeah, and 100%. I think that's why we've seen things like the Steam Deck become so popular. It's what Wakahula said last week when he wrote in. It was just like, finally, I got fed up of sitting at my desk and bought a Steam Deck after 2 years, and I love it. I do think the other part of this question, though, I think I agree with you that the PC is not going to kill consoles, but the other half of the question, where it's where Baba talks about changing the way consoles will be in the future, I do think
that I think is more interesting.
And I do think there is going to be a change because we've seen in recent weeks rumors that Xbox might be allowing third-party stores to come to Xbox. The possibility that Steam could maybe come to Xbox and you could bring over your Steam library there. And I think also changes in governments and the way businesses are regulated around the world is also going to have an impact on that. We've seen in Europe that Apple has been forced to open up the App Store in Europe to allow other app stores onto the iPhone, and I think we could probably see something similar on Xbox and PlayStation. If there's a way that say the FTC or the EU could argue that one of those consoles has a monopoly on the market and forces their hand to open it up to allow other stores to sell games on there, is no different to what Apple does. They take their 30% cut, you put your game on the store, and know what you can't buy it from anywhere else, especially as they go digital only. You cannot buy a game anywhere else.
I wonder, because I think what you're saying makes sense, right? Like, and I could see that being, the same line. I get like the EU applying that same line of thinking of like, well, we came for mobile devices, so why not consoles now? And I guess I wonder if the difference there is that the scope of the use of these devices is so much more narrow, and that you could make the argument
potentially, yeah.
You could make the argument.
If you think about,
go ahead.
If you think about one of the reasons that this even happened, right? It was Apple pulling Fortnite from the App Store, and then because Epic didn't want to give Apple their 30% cut on all of the V-Bucks, I can imagine Epic would love to not give Xbox and PlayStation their slice of all of those V-Bucks.
That's the thing, though, I don't know that you can argue that is the same, right? Because I think the idea that like, and stick with me, because I'm interested in if you think that what I'm saying makes sense, because you're a programmer, right? So like, I think you speak this language. But to me, it's like, is that different than like you paying a fee to like if I'm a film distributor, right? Like AMC gets a cut of ticket sales for like you going to the theater and using their theater to watch your movie. So like, why shouldn't PlayStation and Xbox get a cut of that? And I can see that the argument with like Apple and, Android and everything is different, where like smartphones are like,
you have to have one.
You have to have
You can't live without.
Yeah, they're a part of society in a way that video game consoles are not. And that idea that like, like if you don't want to buy the whole, I feel like the argument of like, well, if you don't like how PlayStation does it, you have Xbox or Nintendo or like you have other options on the market to go buy video games. So it's not, and like you could, I guess, make that argument with phones though, right? You could just go to the Android market, but like that is different because if you work at a company where everybody uses Apple and you have to use an Apple, like there are like situations where I can see that limits consumer choice or like allows Apple to create kind of an unfair system, right? As like a market leader. Whereas like the video game industry is inherently less of a biopoly in that way, right? That like, if you think that PlayStation's practices are shit, like you have a lot of other options and they are viable, right? Like if you release your game on Nintendo, it'll if it runs, it'll do well, right? So it's like, it's not like you have to play ball with PlayStation if you don't like the way that they do business, whereas like that's kind of not an option with Apple because it's like that's literally 50% of the market share, right? Of like people that use the device that you're making a product for. And like the margins are different too, right? Because it's like the 30%, right? Like that's the same, but it's like 30% of an app that costs $1 is a lot of,
Well, in the case of Fortnite, it's exactly the same, right? Because you're buying your V-Bucks, you're paying your 30%, and with Fortnite, you can just go on Epic's website and buy the V-Bucks that way. But most people don't. They buy it when they're in the game because they see something in the market, the place that they want to buy.
It's more convenient,
and they buy the stuff. Yeah. So I could see something like that. I could see Epic wanting to have the Epic Games Store on PlayStation or on Xbox,
but
have their games in there.
Do they deserve to do that just because they want it, right? Whereas, like, I think, like, they made a clear legal argument for why what Apple was doing was anti-consumer, and I don't know that it's as clear when it comes to consoles for all the reasons that we just said, right? That it's like,
I think they could demonstrate it though and say, look, over the fence on PC, we've done this, we've got this, we've given consumers a choice. It was potentially just Steam for a while, and yeah, other companies went off and they made their own. There was Ubisoft with Uplay and Battle.net for Activision games, but we came in and we gave them a choice, and we now only charge 15%, and we give people a choice, and we want to do the exact same thing on console, and we want to give developers that freedom to kind of go somewhere else, but still be able to put their games in front of their audiences that they've had for years.
It really feels so different though to me, and maybe it is just me being like, this is how things are, so it feels weird to say that, right? So, and like, that's not how I think, right? Like, I don't think just because things are the way they are is how they should be. That said, though, like, I don't know, because like, I feel like there's an argument to be made that materially, it changes the way business is done in that model, right? Like, it upends that transactional model in a way that I feel like is like clearly damaging to companies' abilities to make money, right? Like,
yeah, even Apple shifted. We spoke about it on Nintendo Noise this week, where we spoke about the Delta emulator and how they now charge the core technology fee, which was what Unity looked to introduce as well. But Apple just pressed on ahead with it in the EU. So now every download over 1 million, you have to pay 50 cents per each of those downloads.
Even if it's a free app.
Yeah. And I could see something like that being introduced on the PlayStation or Xbox side, because they're going to make their money back anyway. Most free games usually that are popular, they have microtransactions and stuff in. But I do think it's interesting. I think Steam Deck especially has shown how powerful an open platform can be.
Absolutely.
When you look at being able to install something like EmuDeck on there, why should I not be able to install an emulator for my GameCube games or my SNES games on my Xbox or on my PlayStation so I can play them?
I mean,
granted, it's not a general compute device, but why should I be restricted?
To play devil's advocate, though, why should Sony or Microsoft have to allow you to use their device that way if that's not the intended use of the product? Because it's like, with a PC, like, a PC is a general use device. A phone is a general use device. Like, these are open platforms, and they're like, I can buy a PC and use it to produce music, or use it for video editing, or to browse the internet, or to play games, or whatever, right? And it's like, that's the intent of the product, right? Is for you to buy it and for you to find use cases for it. Whereas, like, the stated purpose of the PlayStation 5, for example, right, or the Nintendo Switch, is to buy the device and to play the games that they publish and sell to you, right? And the reason that like, we developed a publisher system and all that, and like the checks and balances that we have and everything, is because during the early 1980s, I forget the exact year, there was the great video game market crash in the United States, right? And that was because there wasn't any checks and balances, and anyone could publish a game, and therefore there was an insane amount of shovelware and garbage and shit that didn't run, and that cost the same amount as a full-priced game, and you just got fucked. And like, yeah, I mean, I think
consumers are more savvy now, though. I don't think that would happen.
You're right.
Anyone can publish a game on PC. Anyone can put one out.
Yeah,
but people aren't buying them.
You're right, but the whole point of buying a product from a company like Nintendo is that it inspires trust, right? That was the point of the Nintendo seal of quality, of this Nintendo seal of approval, was that you buy this game and Nintendo guarantees you that it'll run, it'll be appropriate for your child, it'll be this, it'll be that. And that's what you're paying for. As much as you're paying for the device that plays the game and the software, you're also paying for the peace of mind that you're getting a piece of hardware that works, that will be supported, that will yada, 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 right? Like,
I think that idea has gone by the wayside when it comes to software, though. Yes, Nintendo's own software, for the most part, is high quality and runs well. There has been a few exceptions. I look at Pokemon, for example. But there's a lot of shit on the eShop. There is a lot of trash on there.
Yeah, and no doubt. But my point is that the reason you have that level of control is so that what is on your platform is within your control. And like we've had legal situations in the last couple of years that have come up around like social media that like I think if I was, you know, steering a big company like that, I would have those concerns, because look at what happened you know, during like the 2016 election cycle, right? And there was all this conversation around how, you know, social media platforms can be manipulated to spread misinformation, right? And that we should be holding Facebook or Twitter or whomever accountable for what's posted on their platforms, right? And it's like, well, that immediately becomes very, very dicey, because it's like, how do you police content across all of the users, right? And it's just like, you're already at a point where there's so much software that gets put on the legitimate storefronts that slips through the cracks and isn't very good and doesn't run and whatever, fair enough. If you open it to whomever, like, you get to a point where, like, you know, homebrew stuff is ending up on what are supposed to be these walled gardens and creating like a situation where, in the eyes of the public anyway, right, you allowed this to be on your platform. And it's like, that's not actually what happened, right? Like, it's like, you know, we were legally put in a position in your scenario where we have to pull down the walls. Anyone can put anything on PlayStation and we don't have any control over that. It's like, you know, and it's like, granted, I think there's an argument to be made that, well, you would have to sideload it. It would have to be a thing that you would have to jump through a hoop to do and blah, blah, blah. But then how is that different than Homebrew, which is already a thing that you can do? And yeah, they don't want you to, but you can do it, and it's not illegal to do it.
On some consoles you can, but you know, the PlayStation's not been hacked. The PS5's not been hacked this generation yet. You can't get the homebrew stuff on there very easily. Eventually, you probably will be able to. But
yeah, I mean, think about it. We're only like, what, 4 years? This is the 4th year of this generation. Like, it'll get hacked, I'm sure.
On the Xbox side, you can enable like developer mode, but then it cuts you off from the online. You can't play online games. It turns off achievements. It does all sorts of things like that are in place, so you can't cheat the system. You can't hack other players and things like that.
And
that's the other reason. Compromise.
That's the other reason they don't want these platforms to be open. Is that like it does?
I think you could do it in a way though. You could do it in a way where it can be open, just like a PC, and it doesn't cause problems. You know, you can play games on your PC and not really have to worry about it. Anti-cheat exists for a reason, because scumbag players want to make your experience terrible when you're playing a game online. But we've come up with technological solutions to solve that, thankfully. I do think there is going to be a shift on the console side, and I think Xbox is going to be the one to push it. I do think they want to become a platform, and I think being able to bring games in from other storefronts, I don't necessarily think it's going to be Steam, but I could see them making a compromise with someone like Ubisoft and be like, okay, Ubisoft, you can have your branding on there. EA, you can have your branding on there, and you can have your own storefront. And then maybe we have like a Devolver storefront that is all of the indie games that I go to, and they're all kind of separate.
I really don't. Like, I mean, maybe with Xbox, but I think if Xbox does that, it's more because Xbox is conceding that they've lost the race, and that, like, you know, stores don't want to carry their games anymore.
They're playing a different race at this point.
Yeah,
I think they are,
and that's
and I think
fair enough,
I think them dropping out, if they decide not to make another console, I think that's when there is a definite legal precedent of, oh, PlayStation is making a device that's in your living room, and all of these other developers have no choice other than to put their games on that box, because that's where all the players are, and give Sony a 30% cut, and there's no choice from them.
I mean,
they've just got to hand over 30% of their revenue.
You have Nintendo as an alternative. You have the PC market as an alternative. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you've got the PC market as an alternative, but we've already said that, that's a completely different, really a completely different kettle of fish.
Sure.
I,
I don't know.
Nintendo
It's just
potentially, whether the games can run on it or not, I think they'd have to like decide that in court. But
I think that then becomes a really dicey situation though, where like you're punishing. It's like the same kind of conversation we've had with like with Google, right? Where it's like, oh, like is Google a monopoly because they make the best product? All right, we've got a lot more arguing to do about the future of PC and console gaming. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. For the last time, they are of course Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Tyler Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go and show your support just like they did, if you want to write in with your thoughts on today's topic or write in with your own topic just like Baba did, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web. However you choose to get involved or show your support, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Let's get back to the show.
Google is a monopoly in some areas, though. That yes, search is a great product, but they also push their products to the top of the search results, and I think they're currently being sued for this at the moment by the FTC.
They are. Yeah, exactly. But that's my point, though, right? Is like that's a hard thing to regulate, right? Where it's like you can't. There's not really a way. Like you could break up Alphabet as the company, right? But like you can't really change the fact that Google dominates search because they have the best product, and like you can make it illegal for them to.
You can make it so that they can't scrape the data off the website and show that one little snippet of what someone would have clicked through to your website and given you traffic and ad revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And
to bring it right to the top of the post.
Those are all different things, though, right? That's regulating how you do business, not regulating the fact that like you can't punish them for being the only one that provides a good product, right? Like it's not their fault that Bing is not a viable competitor or Yahoo's not a viable competitor. And that becomes like a really weird situation, right? And it's like, I want to be clear. I'm vehemently anti-monopoly, right? Like I am not sitting here saying like, oh, we got to leave PlayStation alone. But my point more is that it's like, I think what you're saying is true that argument becomes easier to make, but I don't know that it becomes a different argument, right? That it's like, what, they don't deserve to charge a publishing fee for being the only box that you can publish a game in a living room on?
I think it changes the publishing fee that you do, though. Like 30% is a lot. And we've already seen that there are like deals under the table. Epic weren't paying 30%; they were paying less because they're much bigger. They're bringing different games to it's a completely different revenue stream.
There's also all that conversation about how like they are. They give preferential treatment to bigger publishers. They're not as friendly to indie developers and things like that.
Like, that all sounds terrible. And that does not sound like a great legal, like stable legal grounding to be on.
Yeah, but again, I think that becomes a really interesting question, though, of like, I wouldn't do that. But it's like, does that mean that the government should legislate and tell them that you're not allowed to give preferential treatment to a game that's more popular, or that you're not allowed to allow people to pay for preferential placement? Like,
which they do everywhere. Like they do that in supermarkets, for example.
Yeah,
like, that's pretty commonplace.
Yeah, so it's like, to me, it's like that is not. I'm not arguing that the ethics of it are good or that they're not morally fraught in some way, but I think it's more like, is it enough for like the governments of the world to decide that PlayStation needs to do business, or that console manufacturers, right, need to do business in a way that's different? I don't know that it is, I think it's like, to me, it feels like it's like, I think it would be easier to make the argument that the percentage is too high and that like across the board that needs to come down because it's limiting growth and this and that. But even that is like, I don't know that you can, I don't know what the legal argument is there to be like, this enough's enough, right? Because it's like, I mean,
that's where it comes in. It's just like, this is a monopoly. The only reason you can kind of get away with charging 30% unjustifiably, in my mind, is because this is the only storefront you have to sell on. It was a bit different when you could go to the store and buy a disc and put it in. we've not been able to do that with PC games for decades. Steam pretty much ate the physical discs lunch when it came to that.
Yeah, eventually anyway.
But consoles are going that way as well. There's the leaked Series X that's not got a disc drive. PlayStation's obviously already had the digital edition since launch. They've shifted away that's the standard model, that you have to buy the disc drive separately now and kind of add it on after the fact.
You can still buy keys in other places, though.
Not for PlayStation, you can't.
That's true. For Xbox and Nintendo, you can, though.
Yeah, and with Steam, you can. Like, developers can issue keys. They can do what they want. But you can't, on PlayStation, I think it gets more and more locked down that this is the only route we want you to go down. We want you to buy stuff from our store. And I do think there's going to be a shift and there's going to be a change. Consumers are going to get sick of it. They're going to be like, why the fuck am I paying $70 for your game that came out 2 years ago on PlayStation when it's on sale on Steam for like $40? Why is it cheaper on PC than it is on PlayStation?
But why is that the company's problem? Like that's not a. And again,
I think that's the consumer. I think the consumer will care about that.
But yeah, but I agree with you. But what right does the consumer have to say that therefore they need to charge the same amount? That doesn't work in any other. That's not how anything works. That's not how any business works. Why is that how gaming should work? And again, I would love this, but my point is that, like, if I go to the supermarket and I go to another supermarket and I'm like, hey, this is more money here than it is there, they'd be like, then go buy it there.
No, but it's the same product by the same company, being sold in two different places.
That happens,
and one of them's cheaper than the other.
That happens though. If I go to Walgreens right now, right, which is there's a Walgreens pharmacy. If you're not in America, they're a pharmacy that is across the street from a grocery store, a major grocery store chain. A package of Oreos costs different amount at both of those stores.
No, but Walgreens doesn't make the Oreos. And my point is PlayStation makes the PlayStation game and they're charging it for cheaper on a platform that they don't own versus their own platform.
Yeah, but so what? Like, I'm not arguing that that's a good thing, but what is there a legal...
I don't necessarily think there's a legal thing. Like, I think that there is going to be consumer drive. They're going to be like, I'm sick and tired of I paid you $500 for this console. I'm paying you hundreds of dollars a year for online support, and now you're charging me more money for the games than I could get on PC. Think that the average maybe some of them walk over to the PC, because I do think the cost of barrier to entry is higher. But then there are all those things like, well, I've never had to pay for online on my PC or on my Steam Deck.
Yeah, but think about online. Yeah, but think about that, dude. It's like, okay, so I buy a PS5. Let's say just for the sake of argument, let's do some fucking bullshit napkin math. I buy a PS5. It costs $500 at launch. And we'll say that the console has a 10-year life cycle, which is longer than it would be. And in those 10 years, I'm going to pay $100 a year for online, right? Like,
I think it's more than that now.
What is it? Is it 120 for the highest? What's the base level for just base? Like, you get games with gold, you get the entry level.
Essential.
Yeah,
as they call that now. Games with gold that died years ago.
Whatever the fuck.
Essential is, I think it's $80.
So it's less.
Pounds.
So it's $60. So $60 a year. So that's less than the cost.
No, it's £60. I think it's $80 because the premium is 120 in the UK.
Okay, so we'll say it's 80 for the sake of, bump it up to 100 even, right? That's still with that amount, right? That budget's for you to have online for every year that you have the thing, and access to the streaming library, and some money for...
Well, you don't get the stream library on that. You have to get that on Extra now. That's not available in Essential.
But
Essential
isn't that...
is just
Yeah, but you said Essential's $60 to $80 depending on the region, right?
But you won't get like the streaming games or anything like that.
No, but we're budgeting $100. At 100, you would, right? That would be the first tier of streaming.
No, that's Extra, which is 120, and then Premium goes up to like.
So say it's 120 then, right? Even so, you have still a significantly cheaper price of entry to get in and start playing games, and you have money that you can spend on games. Whereas with a PC, for that same price of entry, you've spent twice as much easily, right, to get in. Then you also had to buy accessories, right? Because it's like not only the cost of building your PC, it's paying for a nice monitor that'll take advantage, because you probably already own a television, right? But buying a new monitor that can actually take advantage of the PC that you built. let alone a mouse, a keyboard, all that other stuff, let alone the fact that then whatever that, game that you wanted to go and play day and date, yeah, maybe it's cheaper, but it probably doesn't run. So it's like I hear what you're saying, and I don't think that the average consumer that wants to buy a PS5 so they can play a handful of games a year is like, yes, it'll be worth it for me to spend twice as much money, do a ton of research, and then learn how to build a PC or pay someone to build it for me, then set it up, get all the accessories to save $10? I don't know. I don't think so, man. I just don't see it. And
at what point does that cost a barrier to entry become like diminishing returns though? Because we've spoken about the PS5 Pro, the rumored PS5 Pro, that's potentially going to start at like $600 or $700, and then you have to add the disk drive on top of that. At that point, you're getting close to like
things, though. That's the thing.
Those
are
close
options.
though to a. Yeah, they are options, but do I go for that? Like, as a consumer, I think, well, do I go for that, or do I finally build myself a PC? And because I think the PS5 is going to be a more niche console than the PS5
I agree.
will be.
Yeah,
and I think at that point, when I'm thinking of spending 700 to 800, maybe 750 on it or whatever it may be, plus the cost of games, which is going to cost more. Do I just go, you know what, I'm going to pay another $250. I'll sell my PS5 and I'll put that money towards it. I'll buy.
I don't think so.
Instead.
I don't think so. No, I really don't. I think the argument that somebody would is the kind of argument that only someone who has made that jump would make. Is how I feel about it. And I'm not saying that person doesn't exist. I'm not saying that. I'm not making an argument that's based on anything other than what I believe to be true about consumer behavior, in that I think that most people would rather have a dedicated device that slides into their entertainment system and plugs into the television that they're already using in their living room where they already want to relax, rather than having to have a desk set up for a special device that they use to have a more premium gaming experience. I don't think most people care about a more premium gaming experience, at least by that magnitude, right? Maybe they're willing to spend that extra money for a PS5 Pro, sure, but that's still it's not only less
still
money.
The same. I'm taking one out, I'm slotting another one in, and it's
it's an
I'm
upgrade.
Probably upgrading the one I've got.
It's simple.
Yeah.
It's just it's a totally different lifestyle to be a PC person and own and maintain a rig rather than you own a console because you want to play some games on it. And I think that there are very, very hardcore gamers that only play on console, right? Or mostly play on console, like myself. But there are a lot more people that buy a console and are just not that engaged in the hobby like that. And it's good enough. And good enough, it's like that's you're speaking about the lowest common denominator, right? And the lowest common denominator is not interested, in my opinion, in investing thousands of dollars into a device that has limited usage for them. And even if you do have, like you said, right, if you have you work on a PC, like I use the PC I have for gaming for work, right? And I get it kind of used both ways. But as a result, I don't really want to spend time on it for gaming because I'm on it all day for work. So I don't, that's not an ideal situation for me. It's like the situation you said like Wakahula wrote in with last week, right? Where it's like Wakahula's got a family to spend time with, right? So it's like, do I want to be holed up in my office during my free time playing PC games? Or do I want to be in the family space with my family, right? Like, it's like, yeah, and I think, I think those are factors that are not like a silver bullet. I don't think that those are like the end all be all for what decision you make, but I think that all of those little things add up to why PC gaming is, for the hardcore, right? Like, and not for the average Joe gamer that just wants to play whatever the big release is that year, right? Like, I don't think they're the same person. I don't think they have the same habits. And I think in the same way that you and Max are always making the argument of like, well, why would I buy a PS5 if I have a PC? It's like, well, right. And I think that's a reasonable argument now, because it used to be, well, exclusives. And now it's like, well, they'll probably come to PC, so maybe you don't buy one. But I think that that to me doesn't speak to the idea that consoles are in trouble. It speaks to the idea that like needing to own every device to play every game is what's waning. And that's already been something that's been in decline over the last couple of years. Because when we were kids, exclusives were more common, right? There were more third-party exclusives than there used to be. So, you know, it's like...
Yeah, well, I mean, the first party, the platform models just started buying up the studios instead. So that's why a lot of the third-party exclusives went away, because they just ended up buying them.
I mean, you think about like during the PlayStation N64 era, where like the hardware was significantly different enough that like something like Final Fantasy, like, you know, those were games that had been historically associated with Nintendo, and then they became PlayStation exclusives because that's where they played, right? And it's like that's continued till today, where now they spend money to keep them exclusive, but at the time it was just like, well, there's no licensing fee on Nintendo, and they have disc technology, so we can have 4 discs. Okay, well, this is where we're gonna. It wouldn't run on the N64 anyway, and like that created that kind of, you know, each platform had more of an identity of like, if you want to play this game or this kind of game, you have to play here, you have to play here. And like, that's not as true anymore. And like, we're seeing those walls come down and everything. And I think it is, you know, less about what platform you play on and more like what types of games you play and how you want to play them. And, you know, I definitely see, you know, the PC market continuing to grow, because I think what we're probably moving towards is, this is part of a bigger conversation, but there's evidence that shows that Gen Z and Gen Alpha have different gaming tastes and attitudes broadly than our generation, right? And that there are a lot of gamers in those generations that play casual games or play, you know, free to play and are less platform oriented and stuff like that. And, you know, I think that like that's going to come to influence this space eventually, right? Whatever that means. I don't know that means that like that's the trend and everything's going to move that way and just completely change. But I think that there's an argument that a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted as being like, this is how games work, may become more niche and may become a more niche part of the overall demographics of who plays video games, as, you know, playing video games becomes less of a... There's a difference between someone who plays games and someone who identifies as a gamer, right? Like that's a different thing than it used to be. They used to be the same thing. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of like, you know, the kids that Bob is talking about, right? Who are like, who own gaming PCs and are deeply entrenched in the hobby, and like their parents are probably gamers, right? Or they probably have an adult in their life that's a gamer that exposed them to games, and they are more seriously and more deeply engaging with video games as a hobby. Whereas like there are probably dozens and like, you know, orders of magnitude of 1,000 more kids that have had an iPad shoved in front of them and played some mindless clicker game, and now they still play games like that on their phone, but they don't think of themselves as a gamer, but they play video games every day. And it's just like, I think as that becomes a more pronounced divide, like stuff like this is obviously going to influence like habits and attitudes. But I think it's just as likely that like that type of player like doesn't own hardware to play video games, and they play games on their phone, or they, you know, maybe eventually are using like the Xbox app on their Samsung Smart TV, or like those kinds of things, those solutions that we've been also circling for the last couple of years. And that like you'll see, you know, the overall sales of consoles and dedicated hardware start to decline because you don't need them to play games, and you can play games on any device that you own, and that's just how you play games, right? Whereas for a long time that wasn't the case. Like a big part of the original explosion of the casual market was the DS, and like that is part of why the DS sold as well as that it did, is that like moms and you know, like grandmas were buying it to play Sudoku or whatever, right? And it's like you expanded the market, you expanded who played video games. And you know, as we get to a point where there's less stigma around playing video games, and it's more just like engaging in an art form, the way that like nobody looks at you funny if you watch movies, right? Like that's just a thing that adults do. It's how they spend time. And I think that games are crossing that precipice now. right? And it's kind of already happened, but it's still broadly happening as, the generation that doesn't have any relationship to video games dies out, and it becomes less common for there to be, anybody that doesn't have a relationship to them, even if it's not deep in it like we are, right? And I think that that's something that the market is going to have to reckon with, because it's going to, lead to changes in revenue. And I think that like part of the problem right now is like seeing all these big dogs being like, well, we need to have a finger in every pie, right? And it's like, that's just not really how anything works. It's like I guess it does in some cases, but like, I feel like you look at other forms of media, right? And it's like, it's generally, like this studio, like Blumhouse Productions, right? Like they make horror movies, and that's what they do, and they make them really well, and that's how they make money, and they figured out how to do that in a way that is cost effective and gives a great return on investment, right? And it's like,
I think Sony, though, it shows that that's not the case. They've got their finger in pretty much every pie going. They're about to say Paramount by the looks of it.
How well has that played out for them, though, is my point. Is that like I
think Sony as a whole has played out really well. Like they own movie studios, they own record labels.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm talking more about in the context of games and the idea of that, like, you see what Microsoft is doing. They're buying all these arms because it's like, well, we need to have a foot in mobile gaming, so we own King. And we want to have a foot in, these legacy single player titles, so we bought all these companies that make those kinds of games. We bought this company that makes online game, right? Like, and I think that like you're kind of doing that at your own peril, right? By trying to grow and grow and grow and diversify. And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see kind of a truncating of the industry again at some point, where like the bubble bursts again and games get smaller, not as an industry, and there's less money to go around, and there's less, of that kind of stuff. I think that that's probably inevitable because we hit such an artificial high during lockdown, and we're still seeing the ramifications of that 4 years later, where people are losing their jobs and companies are going under, and there's all this consolidation. So it's like, I think you're right that things are being shaken up. And I think that there's a really good chance that 10 years from now, the industry looks a lot different than it does right now. That said, I think that there are certain paradigms.
Consoles are going to stick around. Though. I don't think they're going to die.
I don't think there's been a compelling alternative presented yet. And I think that until we get to a point where streaming video games is as seamless as streaming shows and stuff, I don't think dedicated devices are going anywhere. Yeah. And consoles are the most consumer-friendly version of that.
I would agree with that, yeah. I don't think it's going to be PC that kills consoles. I think it's going to be something else like streaming that will probably be the final nail in the coffin when we eventually get there.
Like, you think about it, like PCs as a whole, like the concept of a PC is a thing that's in decline.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't own a PC like that anymore, whereas like everybody used to. And now it's more like you own a PC if you're a professional who uses it, or you're a gamer.
Yeah, otherwise you've got a phone or an iPad if you're just chilling out at home and you want something to browse on or play games every now and again. But for the most part, yeah, you're right.
Like, think about like when we were kids, right? Like every person you knew owned a laptop.
Yeah, well, a laptop, or they had like a desktop. I remember a computer room was a common thing in schools. Like you go in a computer room.
And now it's just like, unless you're a video editor or a photo editor or a programmer or somebody who's using it for work, it's like, that's not, why would you do that? And I think, I don't think there's any evidence that we've hit that point with consoles yet, right? Like that we've talked regularly about how each generation continues to outsell the last, or at least be on par with it. And, that's not changed, right? Like, the PlayStation 5 has been wildly successful. The Nintendo Switch is on track to be the best-selling console of all time, So it's like, I just don't think we're there yet. I think that the idea that it will come at some point is something that I think everybody has kind of decided is an inevitability. But I feel like we've been saying that for the last 3 console generations, and I've yet to see any meaningful evidence to show that that's actually a viable solution, right? Like, I look at me as somebody who has really good high quality internet, and I still can't stream video games well. So I mean, I just don't think we're there. I think it's far more likely it's 2, 3, 4 generations before that's really a viable path forward. Because let alone the fact that there are countries all over the world where the current level of internet infrastructure in like our countries is not the standard. And even in our
The UK
countries, it's
sucks.
not good, right? Like the
Yeah.
internet in the UK is not very good. The internet in many major cities, in New York City, right? One of the biggest cities in the world, there are blocks of that where there's shit internet. And like, okay, so, you know, I think that those are all things that are problems we need to have like far in the rear view before we're talking about everything being in the cloud. And let alone, you know, you're talking about concerns about DRM and all that stuff. Like, I don't know how eager consumers are going to be to do that when we're currently reckoning with the fallout of that with streaming and seeing how it's negatively impacting the development of film, how it's negatively impacting animation, how it's negatively impacting, you know,
A lot of people don't care though. A lot of people just want to turn on their TV, turn on Netflix, watch The Office for the millionth time,
yeah.
and just, you know, be happy while they're eating dinner or just
That said,
chilling
though,
on the sofa scrolling through TikTok.
That said, though, I think there is the same thing, though, where the people that do care about it are complaining, and that I think the people that don't care are getting frustrated by rising costs and commercials and all these add-ons and everything, right? And it's like, you know,
I think consumers are fed up about that in the gaming side as well. Everything feels like, oh, it's full of microtransactions. Oh, you're charging me for an upgrade fee. Oh, why are games costing more? You know, people are just sick and tired of having to pay more for absolutely everything.
yeah.
But I think that's going to be a trend that continues. And, you know, it was the same thing when PlayStation raised the prices on PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've not seen much of it on the Steam side. Steam seems to have kind of mitigated a lot of that. There's only a few games that have been charged at $70. Even PlayStation's not charged $70 for any of their games on Steam yet, but I'm sure the day will come when that happens.
Definitely. So, you know, I think that's a good place to leave it for today. Thank you so much for writing in with that question, Baba. I told you all we might make it a main topic because I thought it was a good question. It was a thought-provoking one, and yeah, here we are, an hour later. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody else who wrote in. Sorry we didn't get to your questions, but we got them saved in the Steam docket, and we will of course get to them in the weeks to come when there's some free time. But remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts for next week's show, or if you want to respond to this week's show, do you think that the end is near for consoles? Are you a PC player that made the jump like Steve talked about? And, you know, do you think can you make a case for why you think more people will be like you in the future? I'm interested to hear what people think, because I think obviously this audience is going to skew a certain direction, right? Because we're all Steam Deck players, right? Or people who are thinking about picking up a Steam Deck at least. So I think, you know, we're all obviously... What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 85 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Split Screen Games weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah,
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a bit of a busy week, a hectic week, I think, for both of us in different ways, but I'm happy